sunny spaces, smiling faces, happy places. But every sunny space holds a shadow. Behind every smile are sharp teeth, and every happy place has something sinister lurking just below the surface.
Welcome to We Saw the Devil, the podcast diving deep into the chilling realms of true crime. Join your host Robin as she unravels mysteries that have left investigators baffled and armchair sleuths obsessed. Be forewarned, dear listener. We Saw the Devil is not for the faint of heart. Our unflinching exploration will take you to the darkest corners of the psyche and through the unimaginable depths of human darkness to unearth stark secrets to the harsh light of day. Nothing will be left untouched. Are you ready? Are you sure? We saw the devil.
Hello, everyone. You are listening to We Saw the Devil. This is Robin, and I am here to discuss Ruby Frankie and that entire horrible mess. I'd lightly been following along with it, if you recall, like way back when it was breaking news. We've gone through the trial, we've done all of that stuff, haven't, kind of kept a light pulse on it. And then the new evidence over the last, say, 10 to 14 days or so that was released after the fact, just the scope of this just kind of blew my mind. And so, for a lot of you guys not aware or fully up to date on it, I just wanted to touch on it. I know a lot of us followed the Lori Vallow case together. This just has so many echoes of that case as well. But when I really saw the, chest cam footage, the videos, the journal entries, just my heart is kind of broken for these kids. So I want to talk about it. But before we get into that, just quick housekeeping, y'all. The website is currently down for maintenance. So apologies. A couple people have reached out being like, hey, what's going on? Am aware the website is currently down for maintenance. So you will have to follow either on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. So We Saw the Devil podcast on Instagram. You can follow me personally at Robin_WSTD on Insta, or We Saw the Devil everywhere else. But I promise the website will be back up shortly. As always, if you're loving the show, liking it, please take 20 seconds out of your day to leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. It means the world to your creators and actually has a heavier hand in stuff like sponsorships and, all that kind of stuff as well. So if you want to support some of your favorite podcasts financially, but you can't, leaving a 5-star review goes a long way. Other than that, y'all, I don't have much to talk about in terms of news or, anything like that. I guess the only thing is I did start to watch, I haven't finished it, Quiet on Set yet, which I can certainly kind of understand how people find it so controversial, but I hate to say it, but I kind of just automatically assume and have for a very long time. So I see people posting about, oh my God, I can't watch it. I can't let it destroy my childhood. But I just kind of assume most of the time that that stuff is happening, behind the curtains, or I don't know. It just color me unsurprised, I guess. But it is really, really sad. I posted on Facebook and I was just thinking, how is Dan Schneider, how is this man walking around and breathing? Just a hashtag does not compute. And then it was the same night, it was the other night, like 20 minutes after I watched the first episode, all of a sudden the news went crazy with P. Diddy apparently escaping the country, which, y'all, I've done so much Googling on the Diddy situation, and I still have no idea what is going on there. All I know is that he had multiple homes in, I believe, like Los Angeles, raided by the FBI in relation to a sex trafficking investigation going on. Some backup dancers and people have done kind of, side interviews and whatnot over it. Have y'all seen the allegations? Have y'all seen the allegations against him? I mean, it's pretty serious. The last I heard was when they apparently tried, to raid his primary residence, and he was gone and was seen at the airport and was supposedly on a plane trying to leave the country. That's quite literally the last that I heard. I've done so much Googling and no one can actually say where he is, which is fascinating to me. The allegations are crazy though. And then Suge Knight, is in prison for serving, I think for voluntary manslaughter. He's in prison for like 30 years or something. And he called into a podcast to be like, hey, P. Diddy, if you're caught, your life is in danger. You know so much about everyone. You're gonna 100% get killed if you're caught. And then there was a clip of another actor, like a young actor, who the advice that P. Diddy gave him when he was a kid was basically record everything. And that Diddy had been recording every happening in his home and residences and everything around him since like 1992. So I can't imagine, but this story is wild. I'm probably going to break it down just because, I mean, this really could be huge, you guys. This could be like Epstein level with the amount of people, just the status of the people listed in some of these allegations. Like, Harry from the British royal family, not that he committed any acts, just that he, all of these world famous people were contacts of Sean Combs. So it's going to be crazy, y'all, but I'll probably lay it out in another episode because this could actually kind of be an iceberg. You know what I mean? When a lot of this information comes out, this could be the tip of a massive Epstein-like iceberg. That being said, with the Epstein comparison, it'll be interesting to see if P. Diddy makes it into incarceration, I guess, while still alive. We need to make sure he doesn't unalive himself. But I digress. Let's talk about Ruby Frankie, Jodi Hildebrandt, and this entire shit show. Whew, it's a doozy, y'all. Okay, so Washington County, Utah authorities just recently, over the last like 7 to 10 days, released audio, video, and photos from this case. So, for those of you who may not be fully in the know on what exactly transpired here, and you just want a kind of a mid-level summary, here we go, okay? So, there was a YouTube channel called 8 Passengers, and it was run by a Mormon woman by the name of Ruby Frankie and her husband Kevin, and it more or less starred their 6 children. Now, 8 Passengers at one point in time had more than 2.5 million subscribers. Not only that, but it amassed 1.2 billion. Again, guys, wrap your minds around this figure. 1.2 billion views. Ruby posted on average roughly 5 days a week, and so there was always new content. People fell in love with the family at first, right? You have Ruby Frankie, whom a lot of people would probably consider conventionally, traditionally pretty, blonde hair, so on and so forth. Their house looked like Joanna Gaines basically fucked it, very stylistically attuned with a certain demographic of, Mormon families, Pinterest moms, a lot of just regular women who are kind of into that aesthetic, and you know what I mean, right? It kind of had overreaching support and appeal to a lot of different groups of people, so it got a little bit more famous. Eventually, people started noticing that something wasn't quite right. And it eventually got shut down because a lot of people really started digging into the parenting methods and calling attention to them. They would make children do wall sits. Basically, they have to sit against a wall and make them do it for hours. In 2020, one of the boys said that he was forced to sleep on a beanbag for months as punishment for just a small prank on a sibling. And then in another that upset 100% the most people is that Frankie's young daughter, I can't remember, I think she was 6 years, yeah, she was 6 years old. Her 6-year-old daughter forgot to bring lunch with her to school, right, for kindergarten. And so the school called Ruby and clearly said, hey, so and so forgot her food. Can you bring some? And Ruby refused. And she said, absolutely not. That's her mistake. She should have gotten up. She should have been thinking about it and blah, blah, blah. This is a 6-year-old child. Eventually, enough people started to complain. In the beginning, like I said, it was Kevin Frankie and Ruby Frankie. That's it, okay? And this is a very important point to make because it was just Kevin and just Ruby. And that channel got suspended, got taken down because of claims and allegations from viewers that some of the methods of parenting, I mean, people claim that it was downright child abuse to just borderline abusive. But I digress. They got taken down. On August 30th of last year, Ruby Frankie's 12-year-old son, referred to as RF in the documents, ran to a neighbor's house. No one answered. That home's Ring doorbell caught the footage. Then another neighbor's Ring doorbell caught him coming up to it at 10:46 a.m. RF begins to walk away, and then you hear the door open and a man yell, "Yes?" And it's just heartbreaking. This is the man who made the now infamous 911 call where he's quite literally choking back tears and telling the 911 operator, the dispatcher, about RF's wounds and how it appears that he'd been detained. And I know that most of us have probably at least heard this call, but I'm going to go ahead and play a couple minutes of this call because they did release the full video. And what I find fascinating is being able to watch it happen. I think Long Crime actually posted it and they synced everything, right? The Ring doorbell footage with the 911 call and, all of that. They basically put it back together, as it were, with the evidence that was made public. It hits you a little harder to see that this child, you see how emaciated he is. And he's sitting there on this man's porch, and this woman, is going to get him some food and candy and a drink. And I think she made him a little sandwich or something. He's sitting like a foot and a half away from him in the chair, to kind of trying to turn around, and he's choking back tears, and he's just right there. And it just made it all just so much more visceral, so much more impactful, I guess, when you see the video attached to that 911 call. Let me go ahead. I'm going to play the 911 call now.
911, the address of your emergency. Okay, and the phone number you're calling from. Tell me exactly what's happened.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help. And he's said he just came from a neighbor's house, and we know there's been problems at this neighbor's house. He's emaciated, he's got tape around his legs, he's hungry, and he's thirsty.
Okay. Is your door locked?
No, I'm sitting outside with him on the front patio.
Okay, cool.
And he asked us to call the police.
What's
So
his
he's
name?
very afraid. What's your last name? He's 12 years old. Yes.
Okay, and can you ask him his date of birth?
Can you tell me your birthday?
Okay, and are the neighbors out of their home, or is anybody looking for them that you can see?
No. Our homes are far enough away. I'm not sure. How did you get out of the house?
Porch. He went out.
He says you just left through the porch at the neighbor's house. Her name is Jodi Hildebrandt, and she lives 2 doors up the street.
Out here in Cayenne, the houses are far apart.
Yeah, out here in Cayenne, the houses are far apart, so he walked just under a block to get to our house. He rang my doorbell and asked me to call the police.
Does he seem to be under the influence of drugs or alcohol?
I don't think so, but he's very thirsty, and
Need an ambulance?
I don't think he needs an ambulance. I'll let the cops decide that, but his ankles are taped up, and he won't tell us why.
Okay.
But he has duct taped around each ankle. Yeah, there's sores around them. I think there's a good chance he's been...
He also said...
Oh, and he has them around his ankles. I mean, his wrists as well. Okay, this boy has been... He needs... This kid has obviously been... I think he's been detained. He's obviously covered in wounds.
Okay. Let's get the paramedics headed over that way, okay?
Oh, that's a good idea, too.
Let's see. Has he told you where his mom or dad are?
Haven't asked him that. Yeah. You know where your mom is?
I really got these.
Yeah, I'm sure that doesn't matter, son. Do you know where your mom and dad are?
Well, actually, I don't know where my mom is, but I do know where my dad is. He's not anywhere here.
Really,
Nowhere here.
Okay. No, he doesn't seem to. He says he knows where his mom is, but...
he doesn't know where his dad is.
That's correct.
I do know where my dad is.
Is his mom home?
He doesn't live
He just says he doesn't live around here.
Okay.
Separate for the
Is his
Yeah,
mom
we're
in
getting.
this area?
Is your mom around here? Have you seen her lately?
No,
He doesn't know where she is right now.
Does he know his mom's name?
What's your mom's name? Ruby Frankie? Ruby Frankie is his mom's name.
So again, RF had duct tape around his wrists and his ankles. There were seeping wounds underneath and they were visible to the eye. RF would later tell officers that he had been held by his mother, Ruby Frankie, and her friend and business partner, Jodi Hildebrandt. And this would kick off an investigation and obvious immediate response to Jodi Hildebrandt's home, which I'll talk more about here in a moment. Let's talk more about what was going on in the background to lead to this situation to begin with. So Ruby and Kevin Frankie have been married for 22 years. 22 years. Granted, Kevin did just file for divorce, so that run is now over, but they were married for 22 years. And they met Jodi Hildebrandt. And if you've been following this case, you may have heard the name Jessie Hildebrandt. Jessie is Jodi's niece and a biological female who identifies with they them pronouns, so that's how I'll refer to them going forward. But when Jessie was a teenager, they were sent to live with their Aunt Jodi, who at that point was a well-known and well-respected clinician, primarily affiliated with the LDS Church. And the church would recommend her. She was friends with and recommended by bishops for things like marriage and family counseling. And Jessie was a little bit rebellious. And Jessie was literally left at Jodi Hildebrandt's, Aunt Jodi's house, where Jodi Hildebrandt starved them, forced them to sleep outside in the snow when Jessie was just 16 years old. Jessie said that their Aunt Jodi confined them, locked them into rooms without shoes, told them that Satan was working through them, and they ended up making a run for it, and they were able to run away. And Jessie did, in fact, go to the police to report the alleged abuse, but absolutely nothing was done. Jessie would later go on recently to say in an interview, quote, "This is not just a specific thing to her," meaning Jodi. "Utah culture is permeated with Mormon culture and this idea of covering up and believing authority. Jodi had everyone wrapped around her finger." And I just want to say one thing, not to completely shit on the LDS Church, but I'm going to shit on the LDS Church here for a second. Whatever church would lie about this too. Here's the thing, right? The LDS Church came out and said that Jodi had nothing to do with the LDS Church for years. Jodi Hildebrandt hasn't been affiliated with the church in any capacity, blah, blah, blah. Like, we were aware of her, being reprimanded, which we'll get to later as well. And no knowledge of Jodi Hildebrandt. Jodi also spoke multiple times. She went to multiple BYU women's conferences, most recently as 2017. That's years after the church began to claim that she had no affiliation with them whatsoever, yet was also directly recommended by the church for BYU conferences. So, sorry, LDS Church. Lie detector test, well, a basic Google search would indicate that that is actually a lie. But I digress. And it makes sense as to why, and I'll get to that in my own personal theories later, but I'll get into why that's kind of important there. But in any case, niece Jodi reportedly was abused years ago by their Aunt Jodi, came out, said it, no one gave a shit. So the Mormon Stories podcast on YouTube, hosted by John Delenn, interviewed both Jessie and Adam Paul Steed, family man who saw Jodi Hildebrandt with his wife for marriage counseling. Now, if you really want to see something beyond evil, heartbreaking, that will probably make you cry because it made me cry, lose faith in humanity, just watch the interview, especially the one with Adam Paul Steed. This poor fucking man. He was molested when he was in the Boy Scouts, but it was a troop that was completely comprised of the LDS Church. He just every form of abuse this man could have pretty much been subjected to, he was, even as a child. And then he thought that he found his wife, his life, love of his life, and then they met Jodi Hildebrandt. For Adam Paul Steed, again, he was sexually abused as a child in Boy Scouts. It was a huge traumatic ordeal. It became very public in going through the court system. A lot of the community ostracized him. He then ended up getting married and, again, going to see Jodi for marriage counseling. Jodi Hildebrandt basically forced him into into group therapy with men that admitted to having raped children. Said, here, you need to go be part of this therapy. It triggered him. But Jodi kept getting in with his wife, and basically her entire MO played out. Okay, this is what we've seen with a lot of her other cases as well. Jodi will accuse the husband, or she will conspire with the wife to come out and say that the husband has a porn addiction. And then the wife starts working with Jodi one-on-one, and somehow she tells Jodi that her husband admitted to being attracted to minors, that he had cheated on her multiple times, and that it was all because of his massive porn and sex addiction. And it was all a lie. And this is what Jodi did over and over. People, including minors and children, by the way, would be referred to Jodi by the church for just all types of addictions and reasons, but primarily related to sex. She would accuse the husband of various sins, quote unquote sins and addictions, and then tell them that they must separate. You must go work on yourself, go to men's therapy. You need to get out of this home, go be by yourself and figure out your shit. You're evil. You're inviting evil into the home. Jodi would then be spending an inordinate amount of time with the wives. And half the time, like in Adam Paul Steed's case, he wanted to, come back. His wife was damn near ready to accuse him of molesting children. His wife was basically accusing him of being a child molester. I mean, it was just, and this happened again repeatedly, and it seemed to be Jodi Hildebrandt's MO. Is suddenly the wife would say, well, my husband, either spousal rape or molested our children, and it would always be Jodi Hildebrandt there pulling the strings like a little puppet master. So this played out with Ruby Frankie in a similar way. In 2018, Ruby and Kevin were having problems with their oldest son, Chad, and sought counseling with Jodi Hildebrandt. Again, Jodi was referred to them by the church. 2018. So Jodi began to spend especially a lot of time with Ruby. Then Ruby and Kevin began seeing her for marriage counseling. By 2018, y'all, and I had to read this like 4 times in order to process it. By 2018, Jodi was living with Ruby and Kevin Frankie. Living with them, y'all. Living with them. She and Ruby, and this is all per Kevin, she and Ruby would go into the bedroom for 8 to 9 hours at a time and then come out, quote, like they were on cloud 9. Kevin Frankie wasn't allowed to walk around his own home. He had to ask for permission. At first, it started out, he was pushed out of the bedroom into a guest bedroom. Then Ruby and Jodi were sleeping together in the same bed while Kevin was in a separate bedroom. I have, just a heads up, I have very little empathy or sympathy or any athies for Kevin Frankie, and he could quite frankly go fuck himself. So I'll talk more about that later, but just imagine if the roles were reversed, y'all. And imagine if a woman and her husband comes home and is like, yeah, you need to go sleep in the extra bedroom. You need to go sleep in the spare bedroom. This new woman, our therapist that I'm spending all this time with, I'm going to be sleeping with her now. She's going to be sleeping in our bed together. You go sleep in the, spare room. By the way, I'm giving my mistress the entire, kind of quote unquote mistress, right? It was never outright said to my understanding. But this woman, I'm giving her ownership of the top level of our house, by the way. So if you want to go to the second story of the home that you pay for, that you bought, you need to ask my permission because that's this new woman's space. And all of that happened with Kevin and Ruby in their own home. Ruby was quite literally dictating everything. And so eventually, Ruby ended up joining Jodi on the podcast Connections and became a kind of sort of business partner with her. And then Jodi dropped the bomb. She told Kevin that, nope, you and Ruby need to fully separate and go completely no contact. Kevin, you can't see the kids. You have to find the truth. You are not living the family truth or your truth or whatever nonsense she said. And then what happened after he left? Ruby ends up moving in with Jodi into her remote desert home with her kids in tow. And not just that, but again, now Ruby is sharing Jodi's bed. Now, based on the information up to this point, I'm just going to inject a little bit of my own personal theories into this mix. Now, again, I have no credentials whatsoever other than living life and being a gay. So I'm going to rely on both of those and a little deductive reasoning to try to figure this out. I think it is most likely, and also, I'm sorry, I get the vibes off of Jodi as well, y'all. And I'm sorry. I think that Jodi is most likely a closeted lesbian who is struggling with feelings of self-loathing and hatred. And I feel like she also has a really, really big sadistic streak. I think that it's wild that that situation persisted for so long with so many different couples because she's been reported a lot. Then she got in trouble for discussing patients with BYU, don't forget, when she was reprimanded and her licensing and licensure impacted. But had Jodi been a man, that wouldn't have lasted. That wouldn't have lasted. I mean, quite literally moving in with someone, pushing the spouse out, sleeping in the same bed, sharing the same bed, parenting together, taking vacations together. I personally believe that Jodi and Ruby were in a sort of relationship. Now, everyone has said, including Jesse, right, that Jodi Hildebrandt is incredibly homophobic. But apparently, apparently, Jodi believes that if women are really close, that they can have sexual relationships with one another because they have deep, meaningful connections. So basically, she could have sexual intimacy, say with Ruby, and it would be explained away because they have deep, meaningful connections. So it's not just, a nasty gay hookup, right? And that it doesn't necessarily mean that you're gay. It just means that you want to be close sexually with a really, really, really good friend. So I think that Jodi I think she relishes in breaking up heterosexual marriages. I think she also takes pleasure in degrading and pushing the men out of the situation. I think it's almost like a power move for her. It's almost like it's almost like validating. She's validating herself in some way, punishing and validating all at the same time. Punishing these Mormon men, her contemporaries, and basically taking their wives. And if we haven't learned anything, if we've learned anything, y'all, it's that some of these people in the fringe LDS, I mean, God, not even so much fringe, there's a lot of gullibility, right? There's a lot of naivete. There is a kind of higher than normal level of gullibility. And I feel like it's possible that Jodi was a sort of predator on this. I think that's absolutely possible. Am I saying that that happened? I mean, it's proven in a lot of cases, right? In terms of her moving the husband out and isolating the wife, everything else in terms of sexual relationship and whatnot is pure speculation on my part. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. But I just find it fascinating, this entire situation. That's honestly, in my completely uninformed opinion, probably how I feel that it went down. But is Jodi self-aware? Like, does she know what she's doing? Does she know why she's doing it? Is this a Lori Vallow type situation where it's really about religious fanaticism as well? I don't know. It's crazy though, because it is clear that this is a case about religious fanaticism. I mean, if you look at it, all it takes is one charismatic or particularly nutty person to convince others of whatever it is that they want to be believed. And in this case, you have a very well respected therapist in the LDS community, and it didn't take much more than that. That was backed by the church, and that's all it took. And then you add in a YouTube influencer. That's quite literally it. Okay, so separately. Now, Ruby Frankie's journal entries were also released in this latest evidence drop, and you can see just how much of a zealot she is in these. She was really believing that the devil was working through her 10 and 12-year-old children, and that they had to be damn near tortured to death in order for them to get through it, to basically not be harassed or possessed by Satan. She legitimately accused her children of being possessed by the devil. But more on the journals and other evidence here in a second. Going back to August 30th of last year. Robert escaped, made it to the neighbor's house, and police were contacted. Yeah, I've already played some of that 911 call. There's also chest cam footage from the scene that was released showing RF being loaded into the back of the ambulance. I mean, they made, I have to say, not to go on another tangent, chef's kiss. Hats off to the transparency of the police department in this case and the openness that they've had between the police and the media. It is incredible. So again, August 30th, RF escaped, chest cam footage, blah, blah, blah. Now, after police were called to that neighbor's house and he was, sent in to the hospital for evaluation, more officers had gathered at Jodi Hildebrandt's house to check on the other children present. And body camera footage shows officers knocking on her huge wood and glass front door. I mean, it's fancy, y'all. You don't really hear anything, and then the door opens, and there's Jodi on the phone with her attorney. And she's refusing to step outside. Now, I'm just going to play about a minute of audio, maybe minute, maybe max and a half. Haven't decided yet. So you can hear what this looks like, okay?
Police officers, open up! Got movement right here? Right there. Contact? Got movement. Open the door! Jodi? I need you to step out.
I have my attorney.
That's great. Step out of the house.
No, I'm not going to step out of the
Step
house.
out of the house. Step out of the house.
Whoa.
We're just going to see if anybody else. Is there anybody else home?
Wait a minute, how do you come to my house?
Right there.
Look, they come into my house.
Just have a seat right there.
Do you have a search warrant?
Have a seat right there.
Do you have a search warrant?
Have a seat right there. I'll explain everything after. Have a seat right there.
Do you have a search warrant, sir?
Control 12X11. Can you hold the air? We're searching the house.
I can tell you what's in the house.
Okay. Just have a seat right there for me.
Do you have a search warrant?
We'll explain it after this.
You can't just come into my house without a search warrant.
We'll explain everything after this, ma'am.
Okay, y'all. So if you have the chance to watch the full video, again, I think Long Crime has the full thing. It's worth watching them pluck her ass out of that house and just right onto her walkway. I mean, you can see and hear the panic in her voice, and knowing especially what type of person she is and what she did, it gave just a little bit. It felt good, y'all. It felt good. So they arrived at the house, they pulled her ass out, and they searched the home. And they found Ruby's 10-year-old daughter sitting in a dark bathroom closet. She was wearing blue jeans and a pink shirt. Her hair had been buzzed off. She's clearly terrified and unable to speak, and also very, very, very clearly emaciated as well. There are a series of paramedics and officers that kind of filter in and out, trying to talk to her. She will not speak. A paramedic ends up bringing her a small personal pizza and a drink. And this child, y'all, was so hungry that she ate all of the personal pizza and half of a large pizza. It took 4 hours of coaxing and reassuring her to get her out of that closet. And both children, whether it was RF or her, both children appear thin, they're dazed, they're in a stupor, they're hardly able to move, they're emaciated, and they blame themselves. Now, RF, here's the thing, y'all. When RF escaped earlier that day, when he escaped, he wasn't going to get help. He wasn't going to try to, save himself or anything like that. He was trying to report himself because he was such a sinner. He thought that it was the right thing to do because it was all, everything happening was his fault. He wasn't trying to save himself or his sister. He was trying to turn himself into police. It's just terrible. The injuries from the children are so bad. In one video, a paramedic outside of Jodi's home tells an officer, "I'm crying." And that male officer replied, "I know, that's why I have my shades on." Again, a paramedic and an officer were both crying because the scene was so bad. While this was going on, Ruby arrived at the house. You see police pat her down, they have her sit on the couch, and she is as mad as a wet hen. She refuses to speak to anyone. I mean, she just has this stuck up, entitled, hateful look on her face. And finally, based on the discoveries made of the children, as well as bandages and wound care, first aid type of stuff, they are both arrested and they're both transported to the local police department where they are interviewed. Ruby just shuts down. She turns off. She's stewing, right? She's stewing. Have any of y'all ever dated a girl and when she gets mad, she just stews? Or when she, like, you hadn't even been in a fight yet, you just know that she's stewing and like it's over, she's mad. Well, Ruby was mad. And she finally said that she would not speak until she had a lawyer. And that entire interrogation in the police department lasted roughly 3 minutes for her. Jodi lasted a whole 7.5 minutes. She's overly friendly. She tells them, you officers seem like nice people, and I really want to talk to you, but my lawyer did advise me not to say a word to you until he can be here in person with me. But y'all seem very nice, and I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm not trying to be difficult, but I mean, really, if you knew everything about this, you would have a lot of empathy for what's going on right now. Like there's a lot going on. Kind of blaming the kids, right? Basically saying that the kids are so troubled. Now, Ruby, Frankie at that point had 4 minor children, and they were all placed into state custody. Ruby and Jodi were eventually charged with 6 counts of felony child abuse. So I'm going to go through some of the evidence that was released, okay? Some of these are physical as well as non-physical injuries. They were extremely malnourished and would be deprived of food and water for extended periods of time. They were forced to work outside in the desert heat in temps above 100 without shoes for hours at a time. On particularly hot days, RF was deprived water and would be punished if he secretly snuck a drink of water from an outdoor hose. They were made to carry heavy boxes up and down stairs. The wounds from being bound with duct tape would get seriously infected. Jodi and Ruby had used cayenne pepper and honey to treat the wounds. RF was indoctrinated into believing, quote, and convince him that he was evil and possessed. He was made to believe that the torture he endured constituted, quote unquote, acts of love, and that, quote, the punishments were necessary to repent. One of Ruby's personal journal entries said, quote, these selfish children who only desire to take, lie, and attack have zero understanding of God's love for them. Another one of her journal entries said, it's the birthday and he doesn't even know what month it is. She wrote that on July 10th, which was RF's 12th birthday. He was so neglected as a human being, as a child, and abused that he didn't even know. This is Ruby writing this, quote, it is his birthday and he doesn't even know what month it is. I told him that he emulates a snake. He slithers and sneaks around looking for opportunities when no one is watching. And then also, Ruby wrote at length about her and Jodi's plans to buy property in Arizona. Jodi had apparently been looking at a remote 500-acre property in the middle of nowhere, Arizona. Ruby wrote about this and she said, quote, they will think they won, referring to her children, right? This is Ruby referring to her kids, quote, they will think they won. They will think they got what they wanted. They will relax. Then pop. We will drop them like hot potatoes out in the desert, their new home. She then goes on to describe how it would have room for them to build a ranch so that the children could experience, quote, natural outcomes like a kick from a horse or a cactus to run into. She said, quote, the devil does not want us to take the children out of society. He did not want Jodi finding this property. He wanted Jodi and I down at the police station, not discovering a place to bring intervention to his entanglement of my children. And finally, in a journal entry on August 27th, just 3 days before RF escaped and authorities descended upon Hildebrandt's home, Ruby mentioned that she had been packing and preparing for a large move. And in the chest cam footage that you see on this newly released evidence, after the 30th, when RF basically escaped and got the police involved, the home was a wreck. Jodi's home was a wreck. Jodi even admitted to police at one time that a lot of their stuff, had been stored. They were about to snatch those kids. Kevin had been told that the kids were so happy without him. They're doing great. You don't have to worry. He basically just sent money because he's a dumb bastard. Just sent money. Kids are good though. They were about to just up and leave the state and go to rural Arizona and not tell anybody. And in my opinion, based on these journal entries alone, okay, just the journal entries alone, which do in fact document a lot of abuse and a lot more abuse, by the way. If you want to hear the full thing or read the full thing, it's all available online. Those kids would have been dead within a month. Those kids would have been dead within a month. It would have been a Lori Vallow situation in terms of a great hunt for children. The kids would not have been alive. It's heartbreaking. Like, it's actually pretty incredible. And that's actually kind of what blew my mind the most out of all of this, is that I don't think when this case broke, a lot of us realized just how close these children were, probably to the end. And when you read all of the evidence and see the evidence and everything all together, there is no doubt in my mind that had RF magically not decided to, quote unquote, turn himself in on August 30th of last year, both he and his sister would likely be dead, if not more. So there was a trial, but they each pled guilty to 4 counts of aggravated child abuse, and 2 counts were in fact dismissed. I mean, became very, very clear that there was enough evidence to basically put them away without, anything. I mean, Ruby gave this tinged, religious fanaticism type of thing with a little bit of remorse. Jodi apparently has no remorse. And the prosecutor in this, Eric Clark, after the sentencing, he said that he hopes that Hildebrandt will serve more time than Ruby. He said that at least Ruby Frankie understands that what she did was wrong and that it was abuse and that she had accepted responsibility. But apparently, Jodi Hildebrandt has made statements in calls from jail suggesting that she doesn't have any remorse at all. Eric Clark also said, quote, "At the end of the day, this is a case about religious extremism, and I think that Mrs. Frankie's statement kind of got into that. These guys went down a rabbit hole, and Miss Hildebrandt believed that she was regularly talking to God, and Mrs. Frankie was following the directions that she was getting from Miss Hildebrandt." I've already gone over my own personal thing. Again, I think that Jodi Hildebrandt, closeted gay, lashing out, angry, she can ruin, hetero marriages if she can, and LDS culture. I think it was just basically a shit show, right? But here's the thing. Ruby is special because there are some people that have a level of sadism, right? And I think that Jodi is clearly, right? Before she even moved in with the Frankies, Jodi had so many accusations and allegations of sadism and just evil lobbied against her. I think that it was very clear, because it was in the public view on the 8 Passengers YouTube channel, that Ruby also had that same type of sadistic streak. I think that, again, kind of like in how Chad Daybell was a lying sack of shit and basically kind of looked around and tried to fling his own poo at the wall of how many special followers can I get, he found his match, his perfect follower, with Lori Vallow, right? Like, she was already a kind of shitty, mean person, but then the right amount of manipulation and religious zealotry just makes people go off the, edge. And then I feel like, at least in my opinion, I feel like this is kind of the same thing. You had Jodi, who was, again, famous, well known, well respected, very well connected, religious zealot. You also have Ruby, who was a religious zealot, and they had a matching level of sadism and cruelty and brutality. And I think that that's why they just together immediately right off the bat, is because they shared that. I don't think that Ruby needed much convincing whatsoever. I don't think that 99% of even LDS born women, right? I mean, because let's be honest, a lot of LDS raised women are taught that they aren't necessarily equal. I don't even think 99% of them would have gone along with Jodi's teachings. I think that Ruby Frankie herself has a special sadistic streak, and that it just happened to match Jodi Hildebrandt's. And I hope they both rot for a very long time, to be honest with you, because I don't think that this is just a religious fanaticism thing. I don't think there's a lot. I think that they are 2 special, horrible human beings. Just my 2 cents, though. So some of you who may not have followed this case may be wondering, okay, well, what happened to Kevin Frankie? What's he been up to? Or surely he has all the kids, right? The 6 kids. Well, before you get ahead of yourself, Sherry Frankie, their oldest child, while all of this was going on, while Kevin had moved out of the Frankie household and was, living an hour away out of the house, letting Jodi sleep in bed with his wife at home, Sherry realized that something was not right here. She was out of the house already. She would repeatedly call Kevin. She was outside of the home. He was outside of the home. I believe she was in college. Correct me if I was wrong. But no one would answer her. And then she actually called the police. She called the local police. And she filed multiple CPS welfare checks and made reports to the police, basically saying something is horribly wrong here. There's abuse here. These children are neglected, emaciated, like do something. No action was taken. In fact, Washington County's CPS refused to act and said that they couldn't due to like a new update in the law. So Sherry Frankie tried, right? She tried to engage with her dad to save the family. So then, after Ruby Frankie and Jodi Hildebrandt, and everybody moved, Kevin Frankie had lived outside of the home for a year, right? Well, after Jodi and Ruby were arrested, Sherry Frankie went to the home and on August 31st, the day after, right? The day after at Ruby Frankie's house, the day after they were arrested, Sherry Frankie went to the home, got like some personal items. I think she got an iPad or whatever for the two sisters who were in basically a DCFS custody, right? Child Protective and Family Services custody. They were in the state's custody. And so the caseworker told police that they believed that Kevin Frankie might be at the house and that he might not be cooperative. So they brought police there. And when they were there, Sherry Frankie and a bunch of other people were already at the house. And she pretty much told them, hey, here's what's going on. Kevin Frankie wanted to charge her for burglary. And then he also threatened to sue the police. Again, here is how fucked up this man is. Not only did he participate in all of the 8 passengers videos where he was shown bullying like a, high school bully, his small child, making fun of them, signing off, literally co-signing off on Ruby Frankie's abuse that she administered to the other children. He was just as guilty as she was during that time. He willingly let Jodi Hildebrandt take over his role, his spot in the bed, literally his bedroom and his home, and went to go live and do men's therapy an hour away, promised no contact with his own children, wasn't allowed to come back to his house for any reason, but, did send money. He ignored repeated pleas from an older daughter who saw what was going on, the emaciation and all of that, refused to answer her phone calls, refused to see her. And then when all of this stuff is made public, he cries over the thought in his interviews over his wife going to jail. You can tell very, very clearly he gave no shits about his own children or their well-being. It was all about Ruby because that's who he was infatuated with. That's all he cared about. While separating himself from the situation, and he did even say in investigators, yeah, well, my children are bad, kind of further supporting it, but also making himself not a responsible party. And then the day after, he threatens to sue his own child because she went to her home, her mom's house, which he hadn't lived at, again, for over a year, to grab an iPad and some personal items for her siblings, for her young siblings that are going into state foster care because they had been so heinously abused. And his concern is to sue that older daughter for stepping up and being there for the younger children. So I'm not quite sure where the sympathy boat is with Kevin Frankie and why on Reddit and Facebook and all these groups and news articles people are like, oh, poor man, poor Kevin, he's manipulated and it's the evil woman. And this is something, and y'all can get mad about it if you want to. You can get all mad about it, is that for some reason, and this is true for all of true crime, it's why people are so interested in Lori Vallow. It's because it's a beautiful woman. It's like the Black Widow effect. A lot of people just want to see pretty, whether you believe so or not, traditionally pretty women fail. Everybody in the story can be awful. And in this story, there are no winners. Do not collect $100. Do not pass go. Everybody except for the children in this story really, really sucks. But it is horrible. It's really, really sad. And I could talk about this case forever, y'all, but that is it for today. I wasn't sure how many of you guys followed the whole thing versus kind of the very beginning when a boy escaped but didn't know the gravity of it or the situation behind it. And it's all just so incredibly fascinating to me. But yeah, just wanted to talk about that because my mind was just completely grown, and it's kind of like the Utah/Idaho connect. So much going on there right now, or maybe the media just as a whole realizes that anything that happens in that area right now, especially pertaining to the LDS Church, just it's a little bit more sensationalized because of Lori Vallow and some other cases. Who knows? That is it for today, y'all. I have another episode coming later in this week, and it's more of a hometown type thing going on. No, it is not the Riley Strain case, although that has played out here very, very locally and horrifically as well. So, super excited to talk about that later this week. What did y'all think? What do you think of the Ruby Frankie? How many years do you think they're going to actually spend in prison? And how do you feel about Kevin Frankie? Do you think he is as guilty, more so guilty, not as? You can leave your comments, shoot them over to info@wesawthedevil.com. And yeah, I will see y'all next week. Until next crime.